to this. It's always kind of weird. Okay, all right. It's November 4th. This is a class brought to you by WebYeshiva.org on the Chassidic Masters commenting on the seasonal holidays. I'm Rabbi Avi Weinstein, and everybody, welcome. Okay, so as advertised, when I set out a message earlier today, Rav Tzadok HaCohen, who we have some familiar with in this class, is going to teach us. This is a pretty arcane subject, but since we're doing all kinds of stuff on Hanukkah, I decided not to skip it, even though there was a tendency to do that to deal with the problem of the Hasmonean lineage and what went wrong. This is a dynasty that was cut off, and there was nothing left of its progeny after some generations. So he deals with the Talmudic passages that teach us about this, the wheres and whys, and brings up lots of questions, interesting questions about how the Gemara can say what it says on the one hand, and what does it mean on the other hand. So it's kind of fun to see how he actually goes through the Talmud and tries to examine exactly what the Hasmonean have to teach us. So, or if they have anything to teach us. V'hinei b'Gemara, it says in the Gemara, in Shabbos, the Gemara that deals with Hanukkah, halashon, it uses specific language that he's going to be very precise in. It says, Ukeshegavra beit malchut Hashmonai, that when the house of the Hasmonean kingdom won, right, or overcame v'nitzchum, and then was victorious over the Yevanim, va'az lo ayu melachim rak achar kach, right? But he says the truth is that when the Hasmonean won, they weren't kings yet. They became kings afterwards. Zera zaram lakhu lahem shem lucha. It was their progeny and their progenies' progenies that took the crown. V'Ramban, Nachmanides, Bereshit Memtet, the end of Bereshit, Katav, this is what he wrote. Shemipnei zeh, because they took the crown, that the Hasmonean took the crown, Ne'enshu HaChashmonaim, they were punished. Af shehayu Chasidei Elyon, even though they were very righteous people. V'naseh nes kazeh, and they got the miracle of the oil. Al yadam, it was through their through their activity. Umikol makom nenshu. Nevertheless, they were punished. Shaloni shayer mizaram klal, that there was nothing left of their progeny. Ad she'amru, right, until they said, Kol da'amar mi beit Hashmonai malka ka'atina, that anyone who said, I came from the Hasmonean kingdom, I was a descendant of it, avdahu, he must be a slave, to lo ishtayer minahu ele hahu revita, because there was nothing left of this kingdom. Not one individual was left except for this one young woman, nafla me'igra umeta. And it talked about how she went up to the roof and then she fell over, or she jumped and she died. Lo nishayer mehem af nekavot. Not even women were left from their progeny at that point. That was the end of the line, the end of the dynasty, as reported by the Talmud. So what was their punishment? So it's written there that their punishment was mishum she'avru al mashen amar. Not there. The Ramban wrote that because they had transgressed something that was written in the Torah, which was lo yasur shevet meYehuda, that the staff or the scepter should not be removed from the tribe of Judah. So it means that all the kings should be of the seed or the lineage of Judah. But they had taken the crown for themselves, even though they were not from the tribe of Judah. Ayin Sham. So that's what the Ramban says. And we didn't find this about them except after several generations. But as far as when the miracle happened, Hayurak Kohanim, they were just Kohanim. Umatityahu haya Kohen Gadol, and Mattathias, Matityahu was the high priest. Veish lavin lama amru b'Gemara halashon. So we have to understand why the Gemara refers to them as Beit Malchut Hasmonean. Why are they referred to as a kingdom when they weren't a kingdom yet? Gam kol ha'inyan ifla she'af shematzinu b'yirbam. Right, and this whole issue of whether we could have kings who weren't from the tribe of Judah is also kind of stunning, because Jeroboam, Shahaya Melech, who was a king, Av Shahaya Mishevet Yosef, he was from the tribe of Yosef, he wasn't from the tribe of Judah. Halo Haya Alpin Navi, and he was made king by virtue of a prophecy. So he had a legitimate kingdom, even if he didn't turn out so great. Nevertheless, Jeroboam was there, and so why wasn't he punished because of that? So does everybody see the questions coming, fast and furious? First question is, why does the Gemara refer to Matityahu as a king when he was just a Kohen, and the Hasmonean kings came generations afterwards? And that's number one. Number two, if the Ramban's complaint is that they didn't come from Shevet Yehuda, well, they're not the only ones who were kings who didn't come from Shevet Yehuda. Bringing Jeroboam is another king who came from Shevet Yosef. Avalkan halo haya al pi haskamat kol Yisrael litain lahem keter malchut. And in this case, all of Israel agreed that they should be kings. Va'af liyanai malka amru rav lach keter malchut hanach keter kahuna. And even to Yanai, he was told that you can be the king, but that should be enough for you. And you no longer have the crown of the kahuna. You have to pick one or the other, demonstrating that Yanai was also legitimate. V'harei al hamalchut hiskimu kol Yisrael. But on kings, all of Israel was part of this decision. V'eich avru al masha ne'amar. So how could you say that they transgressed what was written, like not to remove the staff from Yehuda, or the scepter? Gan eish lavin. So he's firing the questions fast and furious. Yeah, usurp versus legit. Exactly, right? So it says, Lama yeh onesh chamur kazeh. So why, this is a pretty serious punishment. Bishvil avon zeh, for this ostensible sin. Shegaram shichle zaram kamo shekatav Rambam, that it caused them for their seed to be cut off completely from the earth, right, as the Ramban had written. So that's all his questions. To elaborate a little bit, what do you mean pride? So you think they were cut off because they were too proud? That may be so, but the Ramban's reason is because they transgressed a commandment. Right? All of that also may be true, but the Ramban's point is that they lost it because it was never supposed to be there. It was supposed to be from the tribe of Judah. And Rav Tzadok is saying, well, that's all well and good, but that wasn't those weren't the only kings that came from outside the tribe. And that's his major question. So now he's got to explain why that is. Right? Nevertheless, right? I think your typing's fine, right? Nevertheless, this matter we have to understand by way of the Zohar, right? Which is, Rav Tzadok's move, is when he's got a difficult problem, Zohar seems to reckon with it. Amar Malka Mikan Ulahala Karva Dili It Maser Biyadcha Zainan Dili Mari Michi Karva Biada. Ayin Sham. So he says, I'll translate this for you. The king says, from now on, right, everything is mine, right, and will be those things that were given to you should be given to me, right? Those things that were close to you, right, should be given to me. So here's how he explains this kind of cryptic statement. Kol nitzuach ba al yedei midat malchut, dina de malchuta. So the first thing he says, and he's talking about why the Hasmonean, the first ones, Matityahu, were called kings when they weren't. He says any victory comes from the attribute of malchut, the attribute of kingdom, which is the 10th attribute of God, right? That's a law in malchut. Like if you win a war, there's even if you weren't anointed, there is kingship attached to it. Va'af Moshe Rabbeinu alav v'shalom hayat nikra melech. Even Moshe Rabbeinu was referred to as a king. Kamosha Amru Yavama Melech. Right? So there's a Gemara that refers to him as a king. Ukamosha Namar. And as the Pasuk in Dvarim says, Vayhi Bishurun Melech, that there was in Jeshurun a king. Kamosha Amru Bi Shmot Rabbah. Okay, just a second. I just got to get this phone off. Okay. Ukamoshi Amru b'Shmot Rabbah, as it was said in Shmot Rabbah, V'hainu shehu haya hamanatzeach lefaro, and that was that he was the victor of Pharaoh, right? So he also had Malchus, Moshe Rabbeinu, because he also won a war, so to speak. V'hotzi et b'nei Yisrael miMitzrayim, and he redeemed Israel from Egypt. V'nitzuach mimidat malchut, right? And that victory came from the attribute of kingship. Umalchuto haya al yedei Torah, and his kingship came, through the agency of the Torah itself. Kamosha Amru, the Rabbanan ikru malachim, that rabbis were considered malachim, were considered kings. Okay, I'm going to stop for just a second because I just want to see what this message is because I was expecting something. So hold on just a second, both of you. Sorry. Okay, all right, I'm back. Okay, so it says dichtiv, because it's written, right? It's written that you don't have to be called a melech to be considered a melech. You just have to perform what malachim do, right? Be malachim im lochu, because the pasuk in Mishlei says it's through me that the kings will rule. V'chein inyan hayavanim. Similarly, it was with the Greeks. Shehaya gazru al bitul haTorah, right? Because they decreed the nullification of the Torah, vaha mitzvot, lashkicham Torato. So what did the Yavanim do? They made a decree that we should forget our Torah, right? It was an ideological war more than it was a physical war. Even if they killed people. The war was also about the nullification or the establishment of the Torah. Kamosha Amru v'yikra Rabbah, like they said in the Midrash, Malacha yotzei lisakel al simlati et banai, right? V'ikar gzerot haya bizman Yevanim. So the decrees against the Torah were primarily done at the time of the Greeks, right? Ukvar amarnu shehem hayu b'klipa zeh l'umat zeh, right? And that's because they were in this shell, you know, one, I'm going to have to explain this, one opposed to the other. Keneged Kedushat Torah Sheba'al Peh. That this was an attack on Torah Sheba'al Peh. It was an attack on the sages. She'aya ikar hitpashtuta al yedei Shimon HaTzadik, right? That the Torah Sheba'al Peh, which was just starting to spread out through Shimon HaTzadik, She'aya mishayrei anshe Knesset HaGadolah, who's one of the last remaining people from the Anshe Knesset HaGadolah, the men of the Great Assembly, which is the end of the Tanakh. Umimenu hitchila shalshelet HaMishnah. And from Shimon HaTzadik, you have the chain of the Mishnah, the chain of rabbis who gave us the Mishnah. You can see this at the beginning of Pirkei Avot, that it says, it starts out with Shimon HaTzadik, and then it says, it goes through the generations and what their famous aphorism was, what they were known by, what was their signature statement. Ubiyamav, so in the time of Shimon HaTzadik, Haya Alexandrus Mukdan. So Alexander the Great was in the time of Shimon HaTzadik. Vaz hitchila chochma yavanit al yedei Aristo. And that's when the Greek wisdom happened through Aristotle. Shaya b'klipa neged kedushat haTorah sheba'al peh. And Aristotle, that Western thought, was in opposition to the sanctity of Torah sheba'al peh. In other words, it was like Aristotle was the Mishnah's doppelganger, right? It was the alternative Chochmah, which was anti-Mishnah. Shegam hein chidshu b'gavan Chochmah, because the Greeks also broadened wisdom. Umosar milibam b'hanagat derech eretz, right? And they also came up with musar, ethics, from their own thoughts and how one should behave. And that's why they wanted to get rid of Torah Sheba'al Peh from Israel, because they say, what do you need this for? We have ethics. We have all this stuff ourselves. So we have made your whole tradition irrelevant. I want to talk a little bit about that, the nature of the statement. I don't know how historically accurate it is, but I know that the sentiment, to a degree, is truly accurate when it came to the dispensing of the Talmud as a discipline, by Western culture. There was, if you look and saw books, anthologies of world religions or anything like that, Judaism always stopped at the Bible as far as they were concerned. There was no Byzantine period where there was this Talmudic period. It seemed to be irrelevant to the great civilization, right? In other words, that the Hebrew Bible only remained relevant because it was superseded by another Bible, at least supposedly. And so therefore, it remained, but we were somehow entrenched in that Bible, and our whole oral tradition, which is really where our character comes from, was ignored in many ways. Now, that's interesting because he's saying that it was already done in the time of the Greeks. Even prior to Christianity, the gauntlet had been laid down by the Greeks to eliminate this dimension. I mean, what's interesting about that is that it was the Greeks that decided to bring everybody together to have the Septuagint, right? That the Tanakh should be translated into all these different languages. So there was an appreciation for it, but according to Rav Tzadok, there was no appreciation for Torah Sheba'al Peh. Torah Sheba'al Peh had to be removed from the scene. Torah Sheba'al Peh was considered to be a distraction and also sowed the seeds of rebellion, of the Jews against the Greek and Roman entities. So therefore, there was an idea that Torah Sheba'al Peh was subversive. Now, what's interesting that Rav Tzadok is embracing that idea that Torah Sheba'al Peh was subverting Western culture, even though he makes the Greeks and Aristotle the culprit, saying they set it up as a doppelganger, as being the competing wisdom, and somehow the two wisdoms couldn't live together. And now he explains why. Shebamatan Torah paska zohama me Yisrael, that when the Torah was given, the stigma that had begun with Adam and had gone on forever, once we received the Torah, that stigma, that filth, was removed from us. It's like a spiritual tainting. K'mo she'amru b'Shabbat, right? V'gazru heim ha'gezerah shenizkara. So they decreed this decree, Reish Ketubot Gimel Amud Beit, Tivael letafsar techila shiratzu latil zu hamash alehem b'chol benot Yisrael. So the Gemara in Ketubot says that this provincial governor, before a bride would get married, a Jewish bride would get married, he would have relationships with her first. Why? Because they wanted to reintroduce that tainting on all the daughters of Israel, right? Because it had been removed from Matan Torah, so they wanted to make it back. Kamosha Amru, Shadi Ba Zuhama, that they cast upon her this filth. The Yuchas V'Sholem Al Yedei Kain Kol Vladot Yisrael Meotan HaZohama. So then all of the children of Israel would be tainted with this filth, right? Just like Chava was infected by the filth of the snake, right? In those days, the Hasmonean came from the seed of Aaron HaCohen. Shayu Shorish Torah Sheba'al Peh. And as we have learned from Rav Tzadok beforehand, Aaron is the source of Torah Sheba'al Peh. Remember, he said, Siftei Kohen Yechaveh Da'at, or like, or what is it? Not Yechaveh Da'at. Siftei Kohen Yedaber Pihu. I've forgotten what the pasuk is. It was in the beginning, but it's the lips of the Kohen will bring forth Torah, right? So the lips, meaning that it's Baal Peh, right? Shehu Midat Malchut, and so therefore Torah Sheba'al Peh comes also from the attribute of Malchut, of kingship, right? Malchut Peh, the kingship of the Peh, the mouth. Torah Sheba'al Peh Karin La. And therefore, what Torah Sheba'al Peh is actually Malchut Peh. It comes from kingship. Vayidei koach bechinat midat malchut, and through the power of this quality of malchut, nitzchum. That's how the Hasmonean won. They won because they were Kohanim, and Kohanim are the origins of Torah Sheba'al Peh. And with this malchut, they were called Malchut Beit Hasmonai, because of their actions and because of their lineage, and because of Torah Sheba'al Peh, they were certainly that. The Ikar Hito Raruta Hasmonean, right? And when were the Hasmonean awakened, right? Haya al Yedei Gezerah Zo, right? It was the Gezerah against, the decree against Torah Sheba'al Peh that woke them up. Sha'amru, there's a Gemara in Kedushin that says, Sha'yu Omrim Imo Nishbeit B'Modiim, like his mother was captured in Modiim, Ube'emet Hasmoneim Hitkanu Az al Zeh. And that's where they became zealous, Umardu B'Yevanim, and they rebelled against the Yevanim, the Tzilu B'Notehem, and so they saved their daughters, Vehem Amru Shenit Chalala Be'emet. And they said that she had been profaned in fact. Okay, so let's go on here. Vehine Masha Ne'amar Lo Yasur Shevet MeYehuda, when the verse said that the scepter should not be removed from Judah, Umechokek mebein raglav, and legislation should not be removed from between his legs. Hu gamkein al divrei Torah. That's also not talking about political leadership, but it's talking about Torah. Kamosha Amru, Dahacha Shevet Vahatam Mechokek. Because the Gemara in Sanhedrin says, first it says scepter, and then it says, legislature. Umechokek mibein raglav. What's the mechokek mibein raglav? What's this legislation that comes between his legs? Elu b'nei banav shel Hillel. Those are the progeny of Hillel, right? The grandchildren of Hillel. Shemalamdim Torah barabim, who teach Torah publicly, amidst the multitudes. So mechokek literally means from between his legs, where the progeny will emanate from. V'Hillel ba gamkein me nekavot me Yehuda. So here's what's interesting. Hillel also came from, the female line of Hillel came from Judah. How do we know that? This is where he's brilliant, right? Kamosha katuv Tosafot, dahacha meYerushalmi. This is what Tosafot quoting Yerushalmi says. V'hu masha amar Rebbe al Rav Huna dehu min Yehuda, right? That he says that Rebbe said about Rav Huna that he is from Judah. Va'ana mi b'minyan dehu min Dekaria, va'ana min Nugvata. Right? So Rebbe al Rav Huna dahavi min Yehuda va'ana, he says, and I'm from Binyamin, from the male side, right? Dekaria va'ana min Nugvata, and I am from the female side of Judah. Right? That's what he says. Uminekavot kol shalshelet kakohanim ba meishevet Yehuda, and the females of all the line of the priests came from the tribe of Judah. Sharei Eshet Haron Haita Elisheva, the wife of Aaron was Elisheva, bat Aminadav, Achot Nachshon. Elisheva, the daughter of Aminadav, who was Nachshon's sister, and Nachshon came from Yehuda. Vayu'az Hasmonean shoresh Torah shebal peh mechokek mibein raglav. So on the one hand, they had the shoresh of Torah shebal peh that came from Aaron. L'chein huskar b'Gemara ukeshagavra beit malchut Hasmonean, and that's why it said in the Gemara, the house of the kingdom of the Hasmonean, v'nitzchum, and they were victorious. Shanitzchuach haya midat malchut, because like we said, the victory came from the attribute of malchut. Kamosha mavuar bezohar, the biyadha, that in Judah, itmaser kol zine karva, right? That Judah I gave all over, the battle, the arms of the battle. V'anitzchuach shalahem ba'a yedei shahaya b'hem b'chinat midat malchut. But and that victory came from the kingship. V'hainu shahayu shoresh malchut peh Torah shebal peh. And what's malchut here? The kingship is the kingship that comes from the lips, right? And that is Torah shebal peh. Rak biyanai. It's only when we get to Yanai Hamelech, Sheniz Rakabo, right, where things fall apart. Ubitel kol Torah shebal peh. And Yanai nullified his legitimacy by nullifying Torah shebal peh, Kamosha Amru, b'Kedushin, like we said in Kedushin, Sham, v'hu lakach malchut, rak al inyan shevet memshalah. He only took the kingship to rule. He just wanted the political dimension of kingship. V'kach ne'anash, and that's why he was punished. V'kalta zaro, and his seed was stopped or halted. Shel Yanai, of Yanai Malka. Sheitchila Malchut Hordus, because after Yanai came Herod. V'az itchila Shel Hillel. And that's when the chain of Hillel started, Uvanav and his children. Sheitchila Mea Shana Bifnei Abayit, which began 100 years before the temple. K'moshe amru b'Shabbat, v'samuch lo tozman kala zerach Hashmonaim. And at that same time, the seed of the Hasmonean ceased. Okay. I think he likes my voice, Flint. I think that's what happens. Anyway, so here's what happened, and this is pretty incredible. So I want to go over this of what Rav Tzadok says. So remember his questions. His questions were, one, what's everybody's problem here, right? So the first question is, if the Ramban says that all the kings have to come from Shevet Yehuda, and that's why the Hasmonean were punished, that doesn't make sense because there are other kings who didn't Shevet Yehuda, and everybody wanted the Hasmonean to be king, so that should have trumped that. That's number one. And so then he goes into his whole thing. First of all, he looks and says, what is a melech? A melech is someone who is connected to the midah of malchut, to the quality of kingship, like the 10th attribute of God. Right? Malchut is the one that's closest to us. It's the one with the Shekhinah. It's the one we interact with most. And so how do you get to be connected to malchut? You get to be connected to malchut if you act like a melech, even if you're not formally one. Like Moshe Rabbeinu acted like a melech when he went and took Bnei Yisrael outside of Mitzrayim. And other people were considered to be like a melech if they won victories. Even if they weren't in fact kings, they were their energy, their spiritual energy was being drawn from Midat HaMalchut. So he takes care of that. But at the same time, he also says that the Hasmonean, as Kohanim, were entirely legitimate, that they weren't taking the Shevet from Yehuda. They were the ones who won the war, so they also were connected to the Midat HaMalchut. And so therefore, they did so as well. But Kohanim, of course, are connected genealogically to Torah Shebaal Peh because, our own HaKohen represents Malchut Peh, Shehu Torah Shebaal Peh, the kingdom that comes from the mouth, right? So that's Siftei Kohen, right? The lips of the Kohen. Which is the major verse here, and so therefore Torah Shebaal Peh originates with Malchut Peh and with Aaron HaKohen, which is really kind of interesting. So now therefore, then the question is, how do they get punished and delegitimated? And so he says, well, everything was fine, right? So first of all, he answers the question, why are Beit Hashmonai called Malchut? Because they won the war, and they were exemplifying the midah, the quality of Malchut in the Godhead. So that's so that takes care of that. And also, they weren't going to be punished because they were honoring Torah Shebaal Peh. The whole reason they went to war was because of Torah Shebaal Peh, was to bring Torah Shebaal Peh back to Bnei Yisrael so they could have it. It was only when Yanai came later on and decided he was merely a political king and turned his back on Torah Shebaal Peh that the punishment of the cutting off of the seed happened. And what happened at that point, it was transmitted to Hillel 100 years, before the temple was destroyed. That it was transferred to Hillel, who had, Kohen lineage on the one hand, and on the male side, and he had lineage from Yehuda on the female side. So even though Hillel was never declared a king, he was the king of Torah Shebaal Peh, so to speak. He was the one who really proliferated it. And then that way, he was seen as being a Mechokek Shevet Yehuda, right? And of course, he explains all this through the Gemaras that he brings, the Yerushalmi, from all over the Talmud. He builds his case. And then it ends up with this verse from Sanhedrin, where it says, Yasur Shevet Me Yehuda, like the scepter will be removed from Judah, Umechokek Mi Bein Raglav. Who's going to get the scepter? The legislator that come, from between his legs. And who is that? That's going to be Hillel and the Dorei Dorot of him who teach Torah to the multitudes. And Hillel came from the females of Yehuda. And how do we know that? Because Tosafot tells us that it's written in the Yerushalmi, right? And that's what Rebbe said al Rav Huna, Dahavi min Yehuda, that he was from Yehuda, right? And then he says, Va'ana mi Benjamin dehu min Dachra, Va'ana min Nukvata, right? So he says, I'm from Binyamin, but that's, from the male side, and I am from, there from the female side, right? And that's the Yerushalmi that they quote. And then it says, Umenekevot. So from the females, Kol Shalshelet HaKohanim Ba Meshevet Yehuda. So from the females, all the lines of the Kohanim came from Shevet Yehuda. In other words, the male Kohanim came from the priestly class, so they were Kohanim, but they married people who were not, Benot Kohen. They married women who were exclusively from Yehuda, so that you would have the Malchut of Torah Sheba'al Peh on the one hand from the Kahuna, and you have the Malchut of Yehuda through the female line. All right, so what's interesting here is Rav Tzadok, a late Chassidic master, is making a case for the significance, I would say. You got to be careful what words you use here, for the significance of the female line. That even though a woman who's born from a male Kohen, even though she can eat truma, she's not a Kohen. Nevertheless, you see that as far as the Gemara is concerned, and what Rav Tzadok is pointing out, her lineage is significant. Even if it's significant regarding, the boys they bring into the world. So it's like everything else. It's like another wrinkle, another nuance of a significant lineage and important lineage, and how one should know the lineage of both sides. Even in the Gemara, they knew where they came from, what tribe they came from, and it went back many generations because it was information that was going to be important. And to me, that's very interesting that Rav Tzadok brings this up. And I really, I really think that that's kind of powerful from a 20th century Chassidic master, or at least late 19th century. Anyway, any questions on this? Nothing? Okay. All right. Okay. Let's go on. The Divrei HaRamban Zal, the words of the Ramban, B'vadai Gam Kein Emet. So, the problem is, now he's got a problem with the Ramban. But he's saying, no, what he says is true. Shebetziruf Masha Nitchaber Yanai L'tzdukim, because once Yanai had turned his back on the oral tradition and became a Sadducee, the kafar b'Torah Sheba'al Peh, and he no longer believed in the oral tradition. V'shuv lo haya malchut mikoach haTorah. So, at that time, the kingship didn't come from the power of the Torah. Dichtiv bi malachim yimlochu. In me, i.e., in the Torah, the kings will rule. Kamo shaya b'shat hanes, just like it was when the miracle happened. Shayu Hasmonean shoresh Torah Sheba'al Peh. The Hasmoneans were the root for Torah Sheba'al Peh. B'chinat Malchut. And that's the aspect of Malchut, as we've already explained. Vayu az mechokek shayu minekvot Yehuda. And so then they could legislate because they came from the female lineage of Judah. Kamo shamarnu, like we said. Ukevan shu yanai kafar b'Torah Sheba'al Peh. And because Yanai basically, turned his back on Torah Sheba'al Peh, Arei Avar al Masha Ne'amar, he's the one who transgressed lo yasur shevet me Yehuda. He transgressed that the scepter shouldn't leave the tribe of Judah, because the scepter of the tribe of Judah was actually the Bechinat Malchut of Torah Sheba'al Peh, Umachokek Bein Raglav. V'nigzar al Zareh sheyichleh, and so his progeny was going to end. Kamosha Katav Ramban. Just the Ramban was a little cryptic. So he says the Ramban, because the point was, what was the scepter from Judah? It wasn't a biological scepter as much it was an ideological scepter against not only the Yavanim, who had this doppelganger of a philosophy that was supposed to replace the Torah, but also against the Tzdukim, the Sadducees, who also confronted Torah Sheba'al Peh and wanted ostensibly to go back to a more literal reading of the Torah. Okay? All right, ready to go on? We'll go on. V'hinei Chanukah chal tamid samuch leparshat Vayeshev. This is true. Hanukkah always falls near Parshat Vayeshev. Shemedaberet metikun pagam habrit, right? Which speaks about fixing the blemish of the covenant. V'hainu she'yivor v'amecha kulam tzadikim, right? That we are going to be yivurar, that we are going to be purified, and we will be tzadikim again. V'or Torah Sheba'al Peh hu mitle da'atika. So the light of Torah Sheba'al Peh is the ancient, shade. V'zeh shene'amar tizal katal imrati, like it's in Hazinu, that like dew, my words should spread, like dew. Dekoi al Torah Sheba'al Peh. That they're saying, what does it mean my words should spread like dew? That's referring to Torah Sheba'al Peh. V'hu or harishon shenignaz l'tzadikim. And that's the first light that was hidden for the tzadikim. Kamosha Amru in Chagiga, v'yar Elokim et ha'or ki tov. That God saw the light and it was tov. V'ein tov elet tzadik. It says, but tov always means the tzadik. That he saw that Elokim saw the light, and it was like for the tzaddik. Shene'amar amru tzaddik ki tov. Right? So it says in Yeshayahu, speak to the tzaddik because he's good, because he's tov. V'or arishon nignaz la'amalei Torah Sheba'al Peh. And the first light was hidden away for those who struggle in Torah, in the learning of the oral Torah. Kamosha amru al hapasuk ha'am holchim b'choshech. Right, when it says the nation walks in darkness, Ra'u or Gadol or Shenivra b'Yom Rishon, and they saw a great light. What did they see? They saw the light that was created on the first day. V'zeh shene'amar v'rararti banecha Tzion, that I awakened you, your children Tzion, al banecha Yavan, over your children of Yavan, of Greece, and this goes according to what the Zohar does. He's on like a quote riff here. Tzion ihu shichlula v'shapiru da'alma. That Tzion is something that glorifies and makes the world better. V'hainu midat tzadik yesod olam. And that's the quality of tzaddik yesod olam. Tzaddik is the foundation of the world. Shemok shekatvu b'saf sfarim hakadoshim. Right, just like our holy books say, Tzion has the same gematria as Yosef. Okay, v'klipat Yavan shayal lahachnis zohama b'benot Yisrael, and this dimension of Yavan, who wanted to inject this filth into the daughters of Israel, Kamosha Marnu, like we said, Shegazru Tiva'el Tafsar Tchila, when the provincial governor said he had to have relations with each bride, Haya Neged, that was what was really the opposite of this. Midat Tzadik. It's the opposite of Tzadik. V'alkein HaChashmonaim shayu shorish Torah Sheba'al Peh. So the Hasmonean, who were the root of Torah Sheba'al Peh, at that time, so they were clarifying the quality of what a tzaddik is. And they merited that first light that was hidden away for the ones who toiled in Torah Sheba'al Peh. And that's what allowed them to win, over from the Klipat Yavan, because they were the defenders of Torah Sheba'al Peh. And it was Torah Sheba'al Peh against their philosophy and also against their licentious behavior, right? It says, Levi keneged Malchut Yavan, Zeh Shevet Shlishi. Like it says in Breshit Rabbah, it says Levi corresponds to the kingdom of Yavan, right? Zeh Shevet Shlishi, V'zo Malchut Shlishiyah, right? It says that's the third tribe, right? V'zo Malchut Shlishiyah, and it also is a threefold kingship. Upanecha Sion hu ha'hefech miklipat Yavan. And your children of Zion are the exact opposite, the antithesis of the klipa of Yavan. V'Shabbat mein olam haba. And Shabbos is a portion of the world to come. Shebalam haba yitbarer, because in the world to come it will be clarified. V'amcha kulam tzadikim, that your nation is filled with tzadikim. Because all of Israel has a portion in the world to come. Shabbos is got a glimmer of the world to come. Shabbos can also fix this blemish. Ubaparshat Vayeshav nimtza ech shenitbarer Yosef. So in Parshat Vayeshev, what we see is how Yosef is going to clarify this b'midato tzadik yesod olam. He's going to do it with his quality of tzadik yesod olam by denying the designs of Mrs. Potiphar, right, and keeping pure. He's going to be tzadik yesod olam al yedei nisayon v'hamachira haya al yedei Yehuda, and he's going to be purified through the fact that he was tested, by the fact that he was sold by Yehuda. And even though his brothers brought him down from his greatness, that they didn't understand exactly what this design was all about. What HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted from this, shebemet nitgalgel al yedei Yehuda. Why was Yosef sent by Yehuda down there? Sheyivurar Yosef b'Mitzrayim. Yosef went down to Mitzrayim so that he should be tested and purified. Isn't that powerful? That the idea was, even though Yehuda didn't realize it, he was actually doing what was designed by God, what needed to be done to purify Yosef to reach that level of Tzaddik Yesod Olam, which actually came through the agency of Yehuda, actually Yehuda. And he's going to continue by saying, and that is why, and this is like what's interesting here, that Hanukkah always falls by Parshat Vayeshev, and they're intrinsically tied together. We will unpack this further next week, right? And we'll see exactly how this all works together, because Yehuda also is being purified here. But the issue here is Tikkun Habrit, he's saying, because Yosef did not allow himself to defile himself by having that relationship with Mrs. Potiphar. Okay. All right, it's a lot to take in one day. God willing, we'll see you next week. Okay. Everybody, good Shabbos. Take care. Hang in there, Melvin. I'm still praying for you. Mordechai Yisrael. Okay.